Hello and good day to you. My name is Nate and this is Limping Through Models. We're at part, I guess technically 3 of the Moonshiner's cabin build by Interaction Models. I'm going to get a lot of stuff done here that's part of the model and also part of the diorama that's going to be coming with this model when I'm done with the whole build. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. What would this Moonshiner's cabin be without its purpose for existence? So, I purchased a Woodland Scenics Moonshine still off eBay, new in the box, from 1980. Upon opening, I'm confronted with the 40-year-old brittle tree material, which I carefully transfer to a waiting styrofoam cup and set to the side. I take my blade and cut through the bag of white metal still parts and trees and take a quick inventory of the parts provided. I notice there's a figure casting of a man napping on the ground. In the kit he's leaning against a tree, but for the purposes of this build, he may be the best person to prop in the motorized rocking chair. Can't have that thing moving by itself, that would be creepy. I attempt to find out how to put this thing together, but between the standard handling instructions and the insert, I'll have to rely on the front picture for guidance. I start to test fit pieces and find out quickly the parts are not as malleable as I thought, so I had to break out the super glue. However, it's been so long since I used it that I needed to apply some extra effort to get the tip unclogged. After getting that piece back in one piece, I continue to test fit based on the picture and then start the process of filing and shaving all the spurs that are present. Not many of those on this model, to my surprise. Once I have what I think is a complete still, I grab a cup of water and baking soda. Why? I don't know. I figured it would be a good cleaning agent. After mixing the solution, I drop the pieces into the cup to sit overnight for a good base cleaning. 24 hours came and went, and yes, I know I'm wearing the same shirt. It's a new normal or something. I take an old toothbrush and start to scrub clean all the parts. I then grab a paint stirrer and attach some double-sided tape to one side in hopes of putting all the pieces on the stick to prepare for painting. However, the tape was too thin and I could not attach all the pieces, so I'll leave that for later. Thankfully, I do have all the interior parts ready to go for priming. I have a little time to kill between now and the time the new kit comes in, so I get started on the other part of this project, the diorama. I've had this foot-by-foot piece of styrofoam for quite some time, and I previously applied a layer of plaster of Paris over the surface to kind of seal in the entire piece of styrofoam. I figured this would be a good time to break it out and use it. With the base of the cabin where I want it, I start to map out the topography of the scene, including where the trees will go in relation to the moonshine still, the fence to be laid between the cabin and the road, the worn dirt road along the side of the cabin, and the drive behind the cabin where the truck pulls up. I then begin to trace around the cabin base. I will need to cut this out and shave it down to allow for the base to sit into the styrofoam. In addition to cutting the base, I need to cut an additional square out of the styrofoam to allow room for the rocking chair motor. I thought this would be a great time to break out my cordless Dremel to cut out the base. I get the disc attached to the rotor, start cutting, and then I'm reminded of the harsh reality of any cordless tool, needing a charge. This thing is dead as a doornail. To finish the cut, I start with my X-Acto knife. Then I graduate to a larger blade that cuts deeper. Once I've cut all I can, I start to pry off that thin layer of styrofoam I created. First with a pair of tweezers to start the cut, then I continue by shaving the rest with my thin square, being sure to use that tool as improperly as possible. Once cleared, I test fit the cabin base and find that it fits quite well and is flush with the surface. I do have to cut some additional styrofoam off the bottom to give the chair motor some more room. As I continue to test fit, I look around and notice that the underside of the Moonshine Still insert has a diagram of all the parts. I'm not in the dark anymore. I can build it. With the glue in place, the cabin base is affixed to the diorama base and weighed down as it dries. Now to apply some sculpting goop. I use a sculpt-to-mold type of medium, mixing equal parts of wet and dry ingredients to make an oatmeal-like concoction. I start with my attempt to blend the cabin base into the styrofoam, to which the compound decided to recede off of the masonite board. I then move to spreading the compound towards the backyard and start to build up terraformations on the cabin side of the road, making space for the road area and using my extra water to smooth out these landforms. The terraforming continues on the other side of the road as well. I decided I wanted my dirt road to have a single line of tire tracks, so I take the compound and create a mound down the middle of the road into the back drive, being sure to make a divoted junction in the middle where the access roads meet. While still wet, I begin to assemble the Moonshine Still in the wet medium, making indentions for the pieces to drop into later. Finally, the new kit came in, and what you see before you are 6 properly assembled walls with natural wood grain on the outside, contrasted by the smooth battens and spray painted with a Tamiya primer coat for the base. You'll see me throw details on these walls off and on for the next few minutes. I bought some crackling medium because I thought it would be a good thing. I applied the liberal amount on all my detail parts, then the accent paint on top of that. After the first coat, I waited to see the crackling happen, to which it did not, so I added another coat and will use a wire brush later to distress. Now on to my second chance at these walls. I found a good base coat I wanted to use for the outside and started to sponge on the paint, being sure to create somewhat of a translucent appearance to let the primer undercoat show through. I got these resin parts from Mark Stewart of Stew's Structures. I felt there were some parts in this offering that I could include with the other detail parts. I find a workbench and a couple of crates and begin to prepare those for priming. Next up is the stonework. I grab a fresh palette and drop a dot or more of gray paint in most of the reservoirs in addition to other accent colors. I add additional paint to the existing paints to add varieties of stone colors. In a random pattern, I start to paint the stones here and there on the chimney parts. Yes, in the reference photos, I found there were brown and black stones in the structures. Not to worry, these will be toned down with a wash later. I do the same with the foundation parts, adding varieties of gray and brown and black stone. When all the painting is done to my satisfaction, I make a wash with gray paint and water and apply this to the chimney parts and the stone foundation. With the walls halfway done, I start on the corner trim fitting. These pieces are only on a select number of ends, and the process is no different than any other trim you find in a Craftsman kit. Once cut to length and lined up, I paint some glue on the end of the wall and slap on that corner trim, making sure the corner trim is flush with the inside wall of the structure for proper fitting. Not all the walls have the newspaper wallpaper. These bare walls get an additional coat of brown paint and a subtle dry brushing later. I now have 6 complete and detailed wall sections, except for a door, the shutters, and the outside chimney to be attached later. We are getting close to erecting some walls, but first, the foundation. I grab the grooved floor, the painted stone foundation parts, and the base which brings this all together. I cut and or rip these parts out of their place and do some additional sanding to ensure smooth edges. I do a test fit of the floor and the base and notice warping, which is to be expected. It's nothing copious amounts of glue and clamps can't fix. In some areas, the glue bleeds out to the edge. Clean this off as you'll need a smooth surface for the foundation stone to adhere to. To prep the stone for the foundation, 45-degree or so angles need to be cut into each end of the stone. I do my best to eyeball these cuts, and with a little sanding, my eyeball works just fine. After test fitting my cuts, I start to work my way around the foundation, applying the stone one piece at a time. There were parts where I had to shave some of the inner foundation wood to make a flush corner. Depending on the grain of the wood, shaving to fit the parts ranged from easy to hard. Once the stone foundation has been set, I take my super glue and reinforce the joints where the stone meets and where the stone attaches to the base. And now we have a completed foundation. Okay, so a little bit of a debrief here as it pertains to the base of the diorama. So when I was throwing on all of the molding compound all over this this styrofoam, it was really set high, probably about maybe a half a centimeter higher in elevation. There were nice hills and ridges and things like that. And as it dried, it decided it was going to settle down. So it's relatively flat right now. I can still make it work. That's by no means going to be anything that's going to keep me from continuing this. The good news is the track down the middle of the roads here, those effectively stayed intact, so I still have that. I'm going to have to sand some of this right here to kind of even out this edge where the base of the cabin meets with the styrofoam and the molding compound. And also there is a little bit of a bow on the actual foam itself. Funny story, I happened to see one of Luke Talon's old videos today, because my son's starting to get into them now. He saw the one with the tree house and he just can't, he just can't get enough of Luke Talon making these things. And in one of the videos he talks about this very thing. You throw what he was doing with Sculpt-A-Mold, you throw Sculpt-A-Mold on foam, and as it dries, it bows the foam out. And that's what happens here. He uses pieces of wood to kind of square it up. I don't know what I'm going to do with it here. I might just keep it the same, but I might say to myself, hey, you know what? There's my hills, and just go with it. Let it ride. See what happens. So I'm going to sand this down, make it a little smoother, make sure these edges are nice and smooth right here, so there's a nice gradual flush, I guess, meeting of the two parts here, and do some more things probably in the next video or another video after that. The next video I think is going to be pretty much focused on the actual cabin itself, because I have a lot of footage of what I've done to put it together, including the walls, the roof, and all that good stuff, which I didn't throw in this video because I didn't want it to be too long. So I'm going to save that for the next video. So with that in mind, like, comment, subscribe, do everything you have to do to get to the next video, hopefully within a week or two, where I continue the build of the Moonshiner's cabin. Until then, see you next time.